It starts the same way every time. A dusty folder in an archive, a grainy photo passed between collectors, a rumor that travels faster than proof. Someone says a car exists. Not a concept, not a replica. A real, numbered machine, so rare that most enthusiasts will never see it with their own eyes. And then, for a moment, the world goes quiet. Because in our hobby, rarity is not just a number, it's a mystery. Tonight, Timeless Treasures is not chasing speed, we're chasing ghosts. We're following the stories behind some of the rarest vintage cars ever built. Cars that disappeared, reappeared, and survived against probability. Each one is a clue. Each one is a locked room. And every time a door opens, history breathes again. Why rare cars feel like legends. A vintage car becomes rare for different reasons. Sometimes it was expensive, even when new, and only a handful were built. Sometimes war, fire, or bankruptcy cut the story short. Sometimes the car was too advanced for its time. Sometimes it was too dangerous, too loud, too uncompromising, and the world rejected it. But the most powerful kind of rarity is the kind that includes disappearance. A car that is rare and also lost becomes more than metal. It becomes a question. Where did it go? And what happened in the years nobody saw? The Atlantic, a shape that vanished into myth. In the 1930s, a few cars were built not to follow trends, but to define beauty itself. Among them sits a silhouette so pure it looks drawn by the wind. Long hood, sweeping roofline, and a spine running down the back like a blade. People whisper about it as if it's folklore, because for years, it essentially was. One of these cars slipped into the fog of time, moved, hidden, and rarely photographed. Its story became a chain of private conversations. A collector knows a collector who once saw it in a warehouse, under a cover, lights off, as if the car itself wanted to sleep. And that's the strange part. When a car is that rare, it stops living in public places. It lives in private memories. A single sighting becomes a kind of currency. A single photograph becomes evidence. And every time the rumor returns, it always sounds the same. The shape was unreal, and it looked like it didn't belong to this world. The Uhlenhaut Coupe, too fast for the real world. Some rare cars are rare because they were never meant for normal people. Imagine engineers building a machine so extreme that it's basically a race car wearing a suit. Gull-wing doors, brutal sound, and speed that in its era felt like science fiction. Then imagine the company deciding it's too much, too expensive, too intense, too politically complicated, and quietly locking it away. A car like that doesn't just become rare, it becomes a time capsule of what could have been. And when it surfaces, the world doesn't ask, how fast is it? The world asks, how did something like this ever exist at all? Because the most fascinating rare cars are the ones that feel like they escaped their own timeline. The 250 GTO, when competition creates cult objects. In racing, rarity is often an accident. A model is built to win, not to be collected. But when the engineering is perfect and the wins are real, the car gains a second life. Myth. The GTO story is also a story of gates. Not everyone could buy one. Not everyone could keep one. Cars moved through decades like artifacts, changing hands behind closed doors. Sometimes they were driven hard because that's what they were made for. Sometimes they were treated like holy objects. And sometimes, tragically, they were lost, wrecked, burned, dismantled, making the survivors even more unreal. This is where rarity turns emotional, because the car represents a moment in motorsport that cannot be repeated. And the fewer that remain, the louder the legend becomes. The 33 Stradale, beauty built in whispers. Not all rare cars shout. Some whisper. A lightweight Italian coupe with proportions so perfect, it feels like it was carved, not assembled. It wasn't built for practicality. It wasn't built for comfort. It was built to prove that engineering can be art. The rarest cars often have a strange aura in person. They feel smaller than you expect, more delicate, more human. You notice details that modern manufacturing doesn't allow. Hand-formed curves, thin pillars, glass that seems to float. And suddenly you understand, the car is rare not just because few exist, but because the world that could build it no longer exists. This kind of rarity isn't only about surviving, it's about craftsmanship becoming extinct. The Daytona Spider. When copies create a second mystery. Some cars become rare because the world tries to copy them. They inspire replicas, tributes, and imitations. That copy culture creates a second mystery. What is real? Owners become protective. Paperwork becomes sacred. Chassis numbers become security. And sometimes, the most valuable cars live the quietest lives, stored in private garages, driven only on perfect mornings, shown to almost nobody. That's a different kind of disappearance. Not lost, but hidden on purpose. A rare car can survive for decades simply because someone loved it enough to keep it out of noise. And when a hidden car finally appears at an event, people don't just look at the paint. They look for proof. They look for the tiny details that cannot be faked. How rare cars disappear. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Most rare cars don't vanish in one dramatic moment. They vanish slowly. A family sells an estate. A warehouse changes owners. Records get lost. Titles are filed incorrectly. A car is shipped overseas and the trail breaks. Or a car is restored badly, rebodied, renumbered, turned into something else, and the original identity becomes a ghost. Sometimes a car is simply stored for a year, and the year becomes 20. Dust becomes insulation, moisture becomes rust, and silence becomes normal. That's why discovery stories matter. Because the greatest enemy of heritage isn't time, it's silence. The rediscovery moment. When a rare car reappears, there is always a moment before the world knows. A quiet inspection in a dim garage. A flashlight across a chassis stamping. A hand wiping dust off an emblem, realizing it's not a copy. You can almost feel the heartbeat in those rooms. Not because of money, because history is fragile and someone is holding it. And that's the real suspense. Not will it start, but is it still itself? Is it still the same machine that left the factory decades ago? Or did time change its identity? Why these stories keep legends alive. The rarest vintage cars are not just vehicles. They are proof that entire eras once believed in boldness. That engineers once built too much on purpose. That design once carried romance. When we find them, restore them carefully, and tell their stories, we're doing more than car culture. We're preserving human imagination. And that's why these legends matter. Because somewhere, right now, another rare car is still sleeping in the dark, waiting for someone brave enough to open the door. The Hunt, where legends are really found. If you want to understand discovery culture, forget the auction stage for a second. The real hunting happens in quiet places. A small town mechanic's back lot. A storage unit that hasn't been opened since the 1990s. A museum basement with unlabeled crates. A farm building where old stuff became invisible. Because the rarest cars don't always sit under bright lights. Sometimes they sit behind ordinary things, boxes, bicycles, furniture, because life moved on and the car became part of the background. That's why rediscoveries feel like miracles. They're not just about rarity, they're about attention. Someone finally looked closely enough to see what was there. The final rule of rarity. Here's the rule that separates a rare car from a rare story. A rare car is a scarce object. A rare story is a journey. It includes loss. It includes survival. It includes human decisions, good and bad, that shape what the car becomes. And when you hear those stories, you realize something quiet but powerful. The legend was never only the machine. The legend was the fact that it made it through the years at all. So when the next rumor reaches you, about a shape under a cover, about a chassis number found in a forgotten file, listen closely. Because sometimes, the rarest cars ever built aren't gone. They're just waiting for their next chapter. If this story spoke to you, subscribe to Timeless Treasures for more premium automotive legends. And tell me in the comments, which rare machine would you want to see uncovered next, and why?